Well, hello there. My name is Chris Angel, and my pronouns are they, them. Welcome to Allyship is a Verb, the LGBTQ plus podcast that explores and humanizes practicing allyship for the LGBTQ plus community and beyond.
Hi, my name is Chris Tompkins, and my pronouns are he, him.
It was bound to happen that another guest on the show would be named Chris. You know, I actually used to be a barista years ago, and sometimes I'd pick up shifts for another local store. Every time, without fail, all three of us on shift were named Chris, and we lovingly called ourselves Chris Cubed. But chaos, friends, chaos. It was very confusing. We absolutely amplified the chaos, and this is part of why I go by both my first and middle names. There are just too many Chris's in the world, and I am trying to stand out in a sea of them. So, anywho, this is not about me. My lovely guest, Chris, is a dear friend of mine. He's a consultant, speaker, teacher, and life coach. I'd also personally describe him as a ball of love, joy, and light. And I do really mean that. He's one of those people who you just feel uplifted after connecting. And I mean, to be seen by him, it's just very validating. He's such a beautiful spirit. So truly, there's something special about his energy. And I hope that you get to experience some of that today. He's also the author of the book Raising LGBTQ Allies that came out, pun slightly intended, May 2021. So especially if you're a parent or if you're working with kids, I'm going to highly recommend this book. And who knows, you may learn some things about yourself along the way too. Something I loved about our conversation is how intentional Chris is in sharing from his own experience and trying not to speak on behalf of a grouping of people, as well as checking for understanding. Those active listening skills are on point. And he also gave a really good TEDx talk, so please do make sure that you check out his episode page to see all of the wonderful stuff that he's up to. And now, I'm trying something a little bit different, so here are some self-reflection questions. I'm going to give you a few before the conversation and a few after to just help give you some things to think about while you're listening. Number 1, do I make space for people in my life who are sober? Number 2, are there many events near me that don't revolve around or include alcohol? Number 3, do I attend any events called happy hour, whether or not anyone drinks? Just some stuff to think about, and now to the conversation. You call yourself a LGBTQ inner advocate. I haven't heard that term or expression before. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I often get the same kind of response of, well, what does that mean? I think, and if I could just say too that I actually intentionally use that because it does evoke a curiosity with people in asking the question, and we get to talk about it. So I'm grateful that you asked. So for me, an LGBTQ inner advocate really came from my experience after I came out of the closet. I immersed myself in LGBTQ advocacy work. And what I found, my own journey, is that was a lot of external work. I was focused on external, like helping others, helping the community. And what I didn't do was I went from out of the closet, like years of in the closet, out of the closet, to immediately focusing on others. And so what I, like I said, didn't do was I didn't focus on myself and a lot of healing that I needed to really look at, because years in the closet is a lot of darkness. And so for me, being an LGBTQ inner advocate, I feel like, especially in advocacy work, self-care is so important. I love that you often talk about that. Even in our email exchanges, you're really encouraging. Like I felt very validated and affirmed just through your emails, because you focus on self-care.
What my lovely friend here is referring to is in my email signature. Not only do I have my name, my pronouns, my websites, But I also have this blurb that I put in, gosh, I don't know, at some point in 2021, where it says, please know that I honor and respect boundaries around personal time, well-being, caretaking, and rest. Should you receive correspondence from me during a time that you're engaging in any of the above, please protect your time and wait to respond until you're next working or in front of a computer. Prioritize joy, not email, when and where you can. Now, this is not original to me. I've seen it somewhere else and I've adopted it. And same thing, people have seen my version and adopted it. And honestly, I just think it's such a game changer because I can't tell you how many people actually, number one, read my email signature, but also just really resonated with that and loved that as a value. So it feels really good. And should you be inspired to do a version for yourself, please do.
LGBTQ advocate is having self-care, filling my cup up, taking care of myself so that I can be more effective in the world with the work that I do. So for me, being an LGBTQ advocate is healing the stuff inside myself, working on myself, making myself a priority, and then I'm so much more effective in the conversations I have, and I have much more to offer.
Well, thank you, first off.
Yes, of course.
And secondly, inspired to then ask you, so in your book, you talk about how you're also an ally to yourself. I'm interested in understanding for you, what are the differences of being that inner advocate and then also then an ally?
Yeah. We really can only take others as far as we've gone ourselves. And so if I haven't done the things that I'm advocating for with others, because it's so easy in my own experience, if I'm not doing the inner work within myself to uncover, to unlearn, to even be curious, then I'm not able to take others very far. Like the inner advocate is the one of the part of myself that's doing the work of unlearning, healing, growing, self-care, and the ally is the one who's supporting me to do that. Because we do need to be our own champions, because I can be really quick to, oh, I don't need to do it today, or oh, I don't need to, and then I kind of can burn through. And so the ally is the one who's like the support. And I feel like that also looks like allyship in the world. It's the support that we need to be able to do the stuff that we can't ourselves do.
Absolutely. You're also an uncle.
Yes.
Guncle.
Yeah, Guncle.
which doesn't come out super great like I thought it would in my head, but Guncle is a term for gay uncles.
Yeah.
Does that term resonate with you, and how do you generally feel about it?
The term, I think, really, in my experience, was kind of like a hashtag that was on Instagram, so Guncle, Guncles. And so a lot of the conversations that I talk about in my book, are from my conversations with my nieces and nephews. And so when I started to kind of think about, well, there are other uncles out there that are like me who live outside of their hometowns where they're from, who maybe aren't in relationships. And so I started to get curious about, well, how is it for them when they go back to visit their families? Do their families talk about their being gay, or, because it's really easy for me, it was really easy for me to kind of go back to my hometown and to kind of separate my identity, to code switch.
Code switch. Let's make sure that we all understand this one. So, according to a BBC News article, code switching is when a person in a minority group tones down some of the most obvious elements that associates them with their community to fit into a more mainstream group. Meaning, if I'm LGBTQ+, that I try to hide anything that I think would help to give that away. We can do this when we don't feel safe or aren't sure about a situation that we might be in that moment.
To act more, masculine and heteronormative. And so that's kind of, to answer the question, it was a way for me to connect with more gay uncles. How I feel about it is that it's a fun term. I don't really correct people if they call me an uncle and say, no, I'm a guncle. It's
Right.
more of just kind of like a play on words for me, at least.
Right. Like on the card that you get.
Exactly.
Like saying I love you. I love my guncle. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I think they even had a Guncle Day.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Yeah. And a shirt that you can get, which, yeah. So it's kind of, for me, a fun term.
Yeah, that makes sense. We met because we served on the Los Angeles PFLAG Speakers Bureau as volunteers. We'd get asked to speak to various educational institutions, high schools, college campuses, churches even, all sorts of places. Certainly, sharing your story has had an impact on the people who listen to us. And something that you talk about in your book is authentic power. That when we share authentically from our hearts, the power we tap into. I'm curious about a few things. What is it like for you to share your story, and what kind of impact has that had on your life?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Sharing my story has had a huge impact on my life. I think because for a long time I didn't feel like I could share my story. And the more I started to tell my story, the more that people could relate. Because maybe my story looks different as far as the specific details, we can all relate to maybe the same feelings or emotions, the same struggles. And so that's also where I felt empowered, because I felt like I was giving something back and maybe allowing another person to maybe see a part of their story in a new way. That's what I loved so much about, and still love so much, even with Zoom, about being able to speak on PFLAG's Speakers Bureau, because I've been a part of PFLAG for, maybe 6 or 7 years, and my favorite part of being involved with PFLAG is being able to go into, like you mentioned, schools or workplaces and share our stories. And I learned so much because we're often on panels with people who are there speaking. We don't know them in person, but they're on the Speakers Bureau, who live in another part of town, and we all come together. You learn so much, and then the audience learns so much, and we just leave there feeling like I did something beneficial to help further the conversation when those people go back to their homes and maybe they saw the LGBTQ community in a new way. So it's been a huge impact on my life.
I agree, and the same goes for me. Something else I'm wondering too is, sometimes people think they're owed our stories. Not all of us do feel comfortable sharing our stories. It's maybe still being written, or we're still grappling with getting support or understanding who we are. It can be so new to us, or just we simply don't want to. That's our firm boundary. So I'm guessing if you can touch more on that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's really, I think, important to consider, because you do not owe your story to anyone, and not everyone is deserving of hearing your story.
Something that's been interesting for me over the years as I've shared my story and having been on panels with you is my story has changed.
Yes.
It's not because I can't remember the details or anything like that. It's been a combination of my story changes as I heal. I tell things differently. Mm-hmm. And another part too is and I know you're tapped into spirituality in your own way, as am I. Mm-hmm. This feeling of there's someone in the room who needs to hear my story in a certain way. I don't know who it is or what they need to hear, but can't help but feel that. I don't think about it too much. I trust that it'll flow out, but I'm curious if that's a similar experience for you, or has that ever happened for you?
100%. I think that you know what I heard from what you said sounds very similar to like the 12-step structure. I don't know how familiar, but when people share at meetings, the lead share, kind of the structure of that share is what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And often when someone shares their story, they're sharing it for the newcomers, meaning that there's someone in the, like you literally just said, you know, there's someone in the room who needs to hear my story from the, and it changes, you know, because maybe when you're newer in 12 steps, you're sharing more of what it was like. So that kind of takes up a majority of the story. Then the what happened, and then what it's like now is maybe smaller because you're newer. And then as you grow in your recovery, and for me, as I've grown in my advocacy work and doing my own work, then maybe my story isn't so much about what it was like. Now I really focus on what it's like now. The essence still remains, and I'm still mindful of speaking to the newcomer, so to speak, or someone in the room who needs to hear the story in the way that I'm able to offer it. And that's where my spirituality comes in, because I kind of I'm there to be of service.
Yeah, and I've noticed you're sober these days without attending AA. I'm wondering if you feel comfortable sharing about how that works for you. And just to give some background, there's a lot of folks who believe that's the only way to do it, but I think that's very limiting.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, well, I think for me, when I first came out, I immersed myself in LGBTQ advocacy work. I used to go to a lot of HRC functions and a lot of pride events, and it seemed, in my experience, that a lot of everything that I did related around alcohol. And so I was curious, like, why is this such a big part of my advocacy work? And so I also was really deeply on my own spiritual path. I was doing a lot of my own work, meaning around forgiveness and cleaning up my side of the street. And because AA, any 12-step program, the number one thing that they say is that this is a spiritual program. That's kind of the first thing. Giving up drinking was a spiritual thing for me. It was between me and my higher power. It was something that was connected to a lot of the reasons I drank was because I didn't feel good about myself. I didn't have the self-esteem. I was trying to be someone that I wasn't. So all of that stuff was, I think, what you do when you work a program, quotes, like a 12-step program. It was that I found my way to sobriety without going to AA. Mm-hmm. There are other ways around sobriety. I think that I used to think that 12 steps was the only way for someone to reach sobriety. There are other ways. I do think that there are some people who just really need a 12-step program, because 12 steps are wonderful in the sense that they offer support, they offer structure, there are meetings, you work with a sponsor generally. And so someone who is just really, I never want to say, oh yeah, your kind of behavior would warrant this, or your kind of behavior would warrant that. For me, I was just really blessed and grateful that, which ultimately I think is the first step. If you're familiar with the steps, is the first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, and our lives had become unmanageable. So I was taking the first step without knowing that I was taking the first step, because my life was unmanageable.
When I'm thinking about AA meetings and someone who's part of the LGBTQ plus community, I think about access and finding community that's affirming. I'm seeing like a Venn diagram in my brain of people who are affirming of LGBTQ plus people, and then also the AA component, right? So being somewhere in Los Angeles, it's a little bit easier to find that overlap. So I guess I'm wondering, do you find that's important to connect to? I'm thinking of folks who are in rural areas struggling.
Yeah.
That may or may not have access to this kind of space with that overlap. And certainly you being a gay man, a guncle, and all of these lovely identities you carry, they're part of you and not solely who you are as a person. But do you feel like that's something that's important to this part of your program?
In your question, what I feel like is layered is heteronormativity. And I think that heteronormativity it's a force. It is a force. It is pervasive, and it is an invisible force. And so I think that for folks who are in rural communities, 12-step meetings, a lot, in my experience, they have what's called outside issues. And so they only focus on drinking, recovery, those kinds of things, or whatever the 12-step program you're in. And so something like being a gay man and wanting to kind of share my experience of that to some would be considered an outside issue. And I think that LA has incredible recovery, and to your point, has a lot of really affirming spaces. I do still think that heteronormativity is literally heteronormativity is like humidity. It's like you go to some places and it's thick in the air. You feel it. It's sticky. And I think that some spaces are like that without even realizing it. And you may not even realize it, but you're just noticing, gosh, I'm sweating more. Or gosh, is it stuffy in here? And you're not even really aware that it's humid. Because it's not just alcoholism, it's not just addiction, it's the feeling like I'm not worthy enough, feeling like I'm undeserving, feeling like I don't matter, and those are all the reasons that a lot of people, myself included, used substances. And so you can't separate that from someone's experience of, well, that's also similar to how I felt like because I was gay. I was in the closet. I didn't feel seen. I was given these messages of what I was told was a boy is supposed to be like. And that also formed my self-esteem and formed how I related with the world. And so it's kind of like they're fused together. And so if I'm not able to talk about that as it relates to my experience of a gay man, I'm not able to fully tell my story.
Yeah, it's these different lenses to look through. And I love what you said around the humidity piece. It's such a beautiful way of explaining it, even though it's not a beautiful concept, right? Heteronormativity.
Right.
So for folks who live on the East Coast of the States, humidity is life.
Totally.
They're used to it more. And so when I come in from the West Coast, I'm uncomfortable. I'm sweating. Nothing makes me feel better. You shower, and 2 seconds later, you're outside, and it hits you again. So what a powerful visual. When I think about the LGBTQ plus community overall, I don't know that we always do a good job of being accessible. Sometimes that can be wheelchair access. It can be American Sign Language interpreters or ASL or Spanish translations, things like that. Mm-hmm. And I think growing up as a young person in this community, it was like really frustrating that there just weren't enough youth events at the time. And we had like a few things from the community, like Models of Pride conference, and we had a gay prom and things like that. But, especially as a young adult in my early 20s, everything was just so hyper fixated on alcohol and yay, gay people are so fun and we got to drink to have fun and dance. And like, that was it. That felt like that was the culture.
Right.
That was what you could do. So just really disheartening. It doesn't always feel like an accessible space, especially if folks are working through sobriety. A lot of Pride events I've been to, it's a main sponsor, lots of alcohol and dancing. And so I guess I'm just wondering, are there certain spaces that don't feel accessible to you or and people you care about? Or what are your thoughts in general? Share what you feel moved to share. I don't want to box you in. We'll be right back after this break. If you like nerding out on LGBTQ plus history and want to increase your chances of winning at trivia events, I have a bookmark set that's perfect for you. Honoring select events in the United States from 1924 through 2009, you'll learn beyond Stonewall. It's cleverly packaged in a slip with 2 different bookmarks meant to resemble the old-school library checkout cards. Just enough information is given so you can do your own research to learn more, which is highly encouraged. It also makes a great gift for community members and allies alike, especially if you include it in a book. Check it out at the Gender Sexuality Info Shop. Go to gsi.gay and click on the store link. Thank you for listening. And now back to the learning.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. You said so many really important, I think, things, and I'm really grateful that you are asking this question because so I'm in graduate school right now, and I'm at this isn't the call out podcast. I do though think, and yeah. I would like to share kind of an example of what you just asked about spaces. And so I'm going to school, and the program that I'm at Antioch is the LGBT specialization. So they have different specializations. One of them is the LGBT specialization. And so what's been interesting to me in my time is that I don't know if it's every week, maybe it's every month, but I'm on an email list for the specialization. They send out an email especially because of Zoom, because of the pandemic, they've been having these happy hours. They call them happy hours, come and every Sunday, it's the LGBT specialization happy hour. And I didn't realize it until a few quarters in, maybe after my second quarter. I was like, they're promoting this as the very thing that I don't feel comfortable. I don't go to happy hours. And so to even promote it as a happy hour, to me, speaks to the prevalence of drinking. I didn't have any interest in participating, even though it's on Zoom and I don't have to have a drink in my home, to participate. So I just wanted to share that because I think that's another example of how pervasive drinking substances is, not just in the LGBTQ community. I mean, it is just in general. Advertisements, alcohol, all of that.
Yeah.
I was in charge of a new member recruitment event, and it was to reach a very specific demographic for the organization. It was a membership-driven organization, and one of the primary events that I was responsible for was called TGIF, and it was where we would find a bar in a community in a big city, which had, that was where we were trying to maybe recruit more members from that particular city, geographic location. And I was always at a bar. And when I found the first venue that was at a non-bar, I remember I got called into the executive's office, and they told me that I could not have the event, even though the place was willing to give us a really great discount. It was a new establishment.
Wow.
And specifically, I remember exactly what they said to me. They said, the bar is for the LGBTQ community, what the church is for straight people. And so if we're going to reach this particular group, we need to have this event at a bar. And that to me kind of was, oh, okay. That basically set the tone for my experience of working, and specifically working on this event.
Yeah, I don't want to pose this as a conversation saying you can't have happy hours. That's not the answer.
Totally.
Yeah, and recognize and you need varied events, and you need to think about who's not there and why.
Yes. Thank you for that perfect. Yes, exactly.
Switching gears a bit, you came out in Mexico, and automatically I'm a person here in the United States who consumes questionable media. There's this thing where, and this really exists here, when there's a country like Mexico, there's this dang yellow tint and guitar music like dun-dun-dun, weeds tumbling along. Like there's a whole vibe. And I mean, this could be a whole other episode in itself. So, but I'm thinking about that and machismo. I'm curious about how you define it and if it's something you've experienced or bumped up against, because the way I've heard it described is what I would call toxic masculinity here. And so when I think about you coming out of Mexico, I'm wondering, is that even a safe space to come out? Because I have all of these ideas, myths, misconceptions, generalizations going on in my head because of our media here in the States. So I guess, can you share more about that?
Yeah, thank you. I think that, to your point about being in the United States, I'm from Arizona. So I'm from Tucson, Arizona specifically, which is very close to the US-Mexico border. And the messages that I received living in Tucson were pervasive as far as negative, messages about Mexico and going across the border and border cities and my family, my sister, my stepdad who raised me is Mexican, and my sister, she's my half sister technically, but I would never say that, just to say that my stepdad who raised me is my stepdad. But my sister, so my family's Mexican, and so to grow up and to receive those messages and then to move to Mexico myself and to unlearn that, oh my gosh, this is, I remember when I lived in Mexico. So I came out in Mexico because I was living there. It was one of the first jobs that I had after I graduated college. And I remember I had some friends from the US that were coming to visit me where I lived. And I remember when they got there, I took them to a mall and they were like, Mexico has mall? Like there are malls in Mexico? And I took them to this mall and they were so astonished, and that's sad because that just speaks to, just the other day I was Googling, I was going to send my friend a picture of Mexico City where I've had the opportunity to spend some time at recently. And there was there were a lot of memes that showed this filter, this color filter. There are certain filters, you mentioned media, there are certain filters that we see in movies that filmmakers use to make a scene feel more scary. And so whenever South America, specifically Mexico, is used in a movie, they use this filter. Mm-hmm. And so it seems like this very scary, dangerous place. And then the meme contrasts that, what Mexico is like from US moviegoers. And it's astonishing to see the feeling that you get from just the differences of the filters. So
exactly.
Going back to your question about machismo. So when I lived in Mexico, Latin American culture, very much there is a machismo culture, and there's also what's called marionismo, which I'm not sure if you've or your listeners have heard of, but it's kind of the same side of the other side of the same coin, where you have in a lot of Latin communities, the father, the kind of the patriarch, is the breadwinner, is the kind of the dominant force, and the mother is like the Virgin Mary, because there's a lot of Catholicism. It's kind of rooted in religion, is where she's the nurturing, the motherly figure. And so what's interesting is that, so in Spanish, in Mexico specifically, you have padre and madre. And so those literally mean mother, father. And what's interesting is that in just language, whenever I want to say something's cool, I would say que padre, which literally translated means that, or what father, but it actually is it's a phrase that you would say to say, oh, how cool, like that's cool. So, oh, que padre, how cool. When I want to say something negative, I say, a la madre, chinga la madre. So pardon for my French because those are cuss words, but
yeah.
It's funny saying pardon my French when I was saying something in Spanish. But
I was thinking that, yeah.
So my point, though, is that a la madre, chinga la madre, mother is associated bad in a bad way, in a negative way. So even in the language, that's how pervasive it is, where the mother's lifted up and looked upon as this, revered being, and she's also denigrated. And so the father's cool, looked up to, and revered. This is very, very layered and nuanced, and I'm sharing from my experience of what it was like growing up with a stepfather who is Hispanic and was very machismo. A lot of the messages that I received as a young gay child, my stepdad did not know how to relate to me as a child because of his own machismo. And that's not to say anything negative necessarily about, because I understand that he only knew what he was taught and he grew up with himself. And that's what I hope to do with the book, is to be able to have conversations so we can kind of like talk about it and explore it and unlearn it, because it is pervasive. Just like heteronormativity is a force, so is machismo. It's the same thing in Mexico, and I remember a lot of my friends shared this with me. It's the same thing in Mexico that says that it's okay for a married man to have affairs, but it's not okay for a married woman. I mean, God forbid that she would ever do that. Like, that's machismo, and that's kind of the force. And then if you unpack that, how that relates to sexuality and gender, and that's connected to the LGBTQ community, and that's connected to the messages that children receive just by virtue of being socialized in whatever dominant culture that they are.
Right, because when I was younger, some of the messages I received, especially related to Mexico, were homosexual, and I use that intentionally, but the term homosexual, my understanding is that it meant something different in Mexico, and that it was more act-based sexual behaviors, that there were basically, I'll just say it because we're here, but that homosexual was a more submissive term in terms of sexual acts, and the other, let's say, partner then wasn't actually homosexual. It was just sex.
Right.
But it was, let's say the person on the receiving end was, okay, let's talk about it in terms of top and bottom. I feel like it's easier because I'm doing all of these dances around what I want to say. But yeah, so basically, tops, you weren't homosexual. It was just sex and people got it. Almost like, not to be crude, but a whole is a whole. But then you're homosexual if you're a bottom. Right. And that's super binary, all of these things. And I'm not saying I'm subscribing to this, but it's just something that I heard. So I guess I'm curious, is this something you heard or experienced when in Mexico, or messages you were taught as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, even in Mexico City is kind of like the New York of Mexico. It's a very big city. It reminds me, like, just physically, you walk everywhere, or you can at least walk. It's a very walkable city. The transportation, it's just very reminiscent of New York. And so I would say that it's more LGBTQ friendly. When I was there in June, and they had rainbow flags everywhere. It was very, you often see couples walking around, same-sex couples, and what's also interesting is that this is a really big conversation. So
yeah.
So I'm trying not to like go down a whole nother territory, but I have experienced that it's more socially acceptable to be top than it is to be a bottom. And that's also the case in my experience of being a gay man in the United States. Even here in West Hollywood, where I live. And so I think that there are nuances to the differences, and there also are so many similarities. And I think that they really speak to the overarching kind of dominant, just patriarchal kind of structure that unfortunately is very dominating across the world.
Yeah, and the broader LGBTQ plus community isn't like opted out from that. Because if you download gay hookup apps like Scruff and Grindr, you'll see people say things like no femmes, mask for mask. So you see it's very much invasive, even in our community.
Oh yeah. I mean, it very much is. And what's unfortunate, I think, is that, you know, similarly to how social media, a lot of people kind of say things like on Twitter or on social media like comments, people kind of say things on social media that they wouldn't necessarily, or act in ways on social media that they wouldn't necessarily act in person. That is similar to, in my experience, to like things like Scruff or Grindr. It's like, you know, we don't really maybe say these things out loud. We think them, and so then we say them in spaces like Grindr or Scruff, because we're not, this kind of goes back to the inner advocacy part, we're not really doing the work within ourselves, and so we're being the oppressors. And that's often what happens, you know, when you're oppressed for so long, is that you kind of take that out on your own people.
I agree. And I'm wondering, has there been a time in your life you could have done a better job of practicing allyship? And what do you do differently now?
Yeah. I do. I think that in my own experience I worked at a bar for a very long time, for 11 years, and this bar served the LGBTQ community. It considers themselves a gay bar. I think that that's not necessarily the right description, because we serve many members of the LGBTQ community, and so in my experience of working there, I feel like there were many times where I heard things about certain members of the community that, because I didn't feel maybe comfortable enough in my own skin to go against the norm, then I didn't say anything. And so there were many times where that would happen. And it was only until I started to kind of, what we talked about, telling my own story and exploring my own story and doing my own work, that I was getting to the place where I was developing that authentic sense of being, that I felt comfortable enough in my own skin to kind of, you know, like we talked about, you know, I was being the LGBTQ inner advocate for myself. So then therefore I was able to allow the ally to step in and say, I don't think that's not a good thing to say. Or is that true? Or, you know, calling out, you know, something that maybe it's not funny.
Can you share about a time you felt truly supported by someone and what they did to show up for you?
I think most recently, I'll just go with the first thing that comes to my mind. You know, writing a book is in my experience, has been a very uncomfortable thing. It's brought up it's allowed all the things that were in the crevices to come out. And so it's been a very healing experience. It's also been super challenging, and it's been super vulnerable. And so most recently, I had a conversation with one of my friends who is, he's a pastor, he's a minister of a church. And we've been friends for a long time, and he's very supportive of me. We've had many conversations about myself being, gay and what that's been like. And so I guess, so to answer your question, is that he read my book and he called me and we set up a Zoom, 2 Zooms actually, because the conversation was, so great the first time, but he wanted to talk about, how he could be a better ally for the LGBTQ community at his church. And so for me, like, just the fact that, he has, I think, 3 or 4 kids, he's married, like, he's a busy person, and that he was that invested, because it doesn't, I don't know how many books I've started where I haven't finished, so I know that reading a book is a commitment, and especially if it's subject matter that, I think that, you really have to have a reason to read my book. And so to me, that felt very supportive, not just because it was, like, air quotes, my book, but it was that he was willing to hear me and to see me and to learn about me and to take that and share it with others, so that and that's really what this is all about, is that when we can take something that we've learned and then share it with others, so that others' lives can be, that much better.
That's kind of like the ultimate compliment, right? Because not only is he supporting you in purchasing the book, but he's taking it to that next step by actively having that conversation with you to apply it to his life and people that he'll be able to impact.
Yeah.
Well, my goodness, we have been on quite the adventure today. So super appreciate you going into all of these various territories with me. And to round things out, what's one allyship tip you'd like for everyone listening to consider?
To ask me questions and to be interested in learning about my experiences. And I think that where that comes from is that sometimes in the conversations that I have, because maybe the LGBTQ community looks differently from when, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that sometimes it's easy to say that certain things don't exist anymore. And so sometimes when I share challenges or like the conversations that we've been having, I have had in the past some people be really quick to kind of, well, there's so much great, and that's true. And that feels very invalidating. Be open to hearing about someone's experience and to validate that.
Well, goodness, I am so grateful to Chris for being so vulnerable and sharing his experiences with us today. Please go purchase his book, Raising LGBTQ Allies. I'll have a link to it on the episode page. And hang on for just a few more moments, because I've got more self-reflection questions for you before we part ways. Number 4. Has someone ever applied silver lining to a hardship I was experiencing? How did it feel for me? Number 5. What messages did I receive on the playground? And number 6. Does where I live accurately portray the world around me? Or are there filters? Visit allyship.com for any resources and a full transcript of the episode. And remember, sometimes allyship means validating our experiences.